We're good now.
All right.
You know, there's so many people using Zoom. I'm not
As soon as that comes up, then we'll.
You know,
They got this.
I have
Mr.
had it
Straley,
work
can you hear us?
Yes, I sure can.
Okay, good.
when
As
I'm
soon as the YouTube, then you can close that
attending
window.
meetings.
now.
I've not had any problem with it.
All right. Okay, Mr. Straley, we can pull Mr. Straley up here. Go ahead, Dee. And if
Okay.
you'll just continue with citizens to be heard.
Item 3, citizens to be heard. Are there any citizens in the room? No.
In the Zoom room.
Then on by Zoom or by
Nobody.
conference call?
Nobody
Oh,
else here.
only other than Mr. Straley that has a presentation for our audit. There's no other citizens that we can see on the.
Okay, we will move on to item 4 then. Consideration and possible action on presentation of 2019 Aransas County Appraisal District Audit.
All right.
Mr. Straley.
Okay, here I am. I think y'all all have copies of it, and it's going to be pretty much presentation like we've done in the past. I'm going to start out with the opinion letter. And there's several important paragraphs in here. Well, it's all important, but management's responsibility. Well, management is responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements. And Mike and Josie does a real good job of that. We have very few journal entries, and they're the same recurring entries we have. And then our responsibility is to express an opinion on these financial statements in accordance with generally accepted governmental auditing standards. And then on the second page of the opinion letter is the opinion. And it's an unqualified opinion, which is the best you can have. And it's what you've had in the past years. And it basically states that the financial statements are presented fairly in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. There are other statements in there, the management discussion and analysis, the net pension liability, and the schedule of contributions. So that having been said, it is, like I said, it was a good opinion. It's an unqualified opinion. On page 3, I'm not going to go into detail of this, but page 3 starts the management discussion and analysis. And this is what Mike and Josie put together. I help them with the numbers, but they've put some other information in there. A lot of this has to do with the accrual basis financial statements, and it's more important for y'all to do the fund basis financial statements. And let me show you what that is. If you want to, you can go to page 11. 11 is where the financial statements actually start. And as I've explained in the past, there's 3 columns here. You have the general fund on the far left, and that's the fund accounting. That is the what you use, the basis for your budget. That's how you normally account for your assets and liabilities, revenues and expenditures. However, GASB 34 came around a few years back, and they wanted it also to show accrual basis. And that basically puts the fixed assets in there, any long-term debt. You used to have a long-term lease that you don't have anymore. It was paid off in 2018. And you also have pension liability. And you can see there under the general fund, your total assets are $792,000. For the statement of net position going across to the right, which includes the fixed assets, it's $1,508,000. Total cash went down about $100,000, but you're still spending money on your building and equipment. The capital assets went down, but that was because of the depreciation. You take a depreciation on your assets, and that depreciation was $41,000. Going on down and looking at general fund, there's just accounts payable of $1,233, and that's pretty normal. No major changes there. one big change, your net pension liability, which is the last and the total liabilities, went up substantially. And I'm not going to go over there, but if you're interested in it, on page 33 is how that is calculated. And what happened on the change, the reason there was liability went up so much. Last year, you had investment income of $353,000. Of course, this is with the actuary and investments in your retirement plan, which y'all really don't have anything to do with. You just put the money in it and they invest it. And this is a year behind too. So for the 2019 financials, we're using the 2018 information, and the investment income is actually a net loss of 51,000, where in the prior year it was a positive 353,000. So that's why the pension liability went up so much. Now, again, this does not have any effect on your budget and on your fund financial statements. It's just your accrual basis financials. On the fund balance, you'll see that the fund balance for the general fund was $641,000. That went down a little bit. You'll see that $641,000 is made up of non-spendable money of $89.29, which is the prepaid expenses. The unassigned fund balance was a negative $7,180, and the committed fund balance of $639,968. Now that's explained over on page 20 of your notes, and that really didn't change from last year. The only thing that changed was your 3 months operating budget. We take your operating budget for 2020, divide it by 12 times 3, and that's going to change each year. The committed fund balances have to be, can only be changed by the board. And that's future legal fees of $30,000, computer replacement of $30,000, building maintenance of $31,870, Hurricane Harvey of $290,774, and the 3 months operating budget of $257,324. As I said, all of these did not change except for the operating budget. And so the board can change these. And let's just say, for example, the computer replacement, you want to go to 0. Well, what would happen if in the 2020 year, the computer replacement would go to 0 and your unassigned fund balance would go up 30,000. Your total doesn't change, but it just moves 30,000 from the committed to the unassigned. So, but that is totally a board decision. And looking at how your fund balance went down a little bit, on page 12 is the changes in fund balance, statement of fund revenues and expenditures. And again, we're going to be looking at mainly just the general fund. The taxing entity revenue went up 27,800, which is what you budgeted. You budgeted that increase. Interest income is going up. That's good. It went up about $8,700. The miscellaneous income, most of that is your grant income. It went up a little bit for a total of revenue of $996,564. Your expenditures, your personnel services of $577,037. That went up $23,000, but that's still, the increase is less than what you had budgeted. During 2019, you had some raises, and you also created the longevity pay. So both that longevity pay was new. The only other major changes, Hurricane Harvey, expenditure was $124,634. Last year's $595,000, and that's still mainly on the building. And then in 2018, you were still paying on that lease purchase for computer hardware and software, and that was all paid off in 2018. So didn't have an expenditure in 2019. Total expenditures were $1,024,000. That meant that you had excess expenditures over revenue for a loss of $28,174. Your beginning fund balance was $669,891, and your ending fund balance is $641,717. And again, that ties back to your balance sheet on the previous page when we were talking about your total fund balance and what was unassigned, committed, and non-expendable. So that's just a quick review of what happened. Again, as I've mentioned in the past, Mike and Josie, they do a real good job on doing the monthly bookkeeping. So do you have any questions?
Probably one question, back to page 20 on fund balances. What are the components of that 290 and change Hurricane Harvey?
Don't know. It's just a general catch-all. For instance, the building that the new building that you're in now, most of that's probably already done. You bought the building. You are continuing to spend money. This last year, $124,000. So it's just a general catch-all of all the expenditures and replacements you had to do because of Hurricane Harvey. That needs to probably be changed, decreased, unless you feel like there's, Mike would know if what else still needs to be done. It's unfortunate that that's still going on, but as far as a detailed breakout, I don't have one.
Okay,
It would largely be insurance. That would be fine.
I would assume it was insurance payments. So that is, I mean, it's,
I think both of y'all are right. It's excess of the insurance payments. And then we have some obvious items that we need to repair. So that balance is going to go down for sure.
Yeah, it was as of, and if you've done things since then, he's right, it would drop.
Yeah.
But it would be insurance monies that you've received for which you know there's an obligation that you'll eventually pay for it. Yeah, it'll swap positions on.
And that's what it was, if I remember, because we put it in restricted funds,
No, it-
because if not, it would have had it gone into unassigned, we wouldn't have had it used, we had a building.
this is actually money that's in a cigar box.
This is a committed fund.
I'm a little simple-minded about this. Okay.
Now, Mike, I might mention that, let's say you make that, you decide, okay, we don't need that anymore. And this is just an example. We don't need that anymore. And it goes to zero. That's going to put close to $300,000 in your unassigned fund balance. So then you got the question, are you going to commit it to something else? Or are you going to refund it?
Right.
Yes.
And I think, at least from my position, the board gets to actually have the final say, but until all the repairs are done, then we'll know what we can get back at the end.
Yeah, and that's fine. That's fine. That's totally a board decision.
And I think we're all together on that. So we get all this stuff done and make sure that everything from Harvey's, back like we want it. That doesn't get out to that unassigned, which if it becomes unassigned, then there's more decisions to follow on that.
Sure.
That's right.
Tommy, I think Jack had a question for you.
Yeah, I had two, and I kind of think I know the answer, but I'd like to hear it in your position. On page 9, the pension liability is listed under long-term debt. And I guess that continues to confuse me. But that's just the way GASB requires it. Is that correct?
That's right. You're talking about the long-term, yes. Yes, that liability, and that pension liability.
And I'm not immediately finding it, but I noticed that there were some assumptions about the net return of those funds that Michael and everybody else has. And I saw an 8% number. And I wondered, is that also a GASB number, or is that a real number, or?
That comes from your all of that information comes directly from your gosh, I'm blank now, not your retirement plan. entity.
TDCRS?
Yeah.
Yes,
Texas retirement,
yeah, Texas Retirement. They handle all your funds. All your funds go up there, and all that comes from their actuary report, which
Yeah.
is audited, and we just get a copy of and plug all of their information into your notes.
Right, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tommy, but you get a copy of that and you incorporate that into this audit, is that correct?
That's exactly right.
Michael, for you, since it's your money, here we go, page 35.
35.
It's investment rate of return. What I want to know is that an actual number or is that a target number? And that sounds like something, I'm just curious. It's your money, Michael. And if people work-
I think it's actuaries, isn't it? I mean,
Yes,
I think it's actuaries. I mean, these are,
define actuaries as you're using, please.
those are returns that we're seeing in the marketplace.
They're real.
Yeah.
Use the term real. I
Like,
understand
again, you know,
that. Actuary is a projection.
oh, well, these are, no, those are, I don't know.
Actuary versus actual. It's an important distinction.
Yeah.
Insurance people live and die by actuaries.
Without having that TCDRS report in front of me, I wouldn't be able to.
Okay, my question for you then, aside from this, is verify that that's a projection or a real number.
Okay.
So you don't get slipped up on. That's what happens to drive some of this pension liability is when you have a loss as it happened in 2019.
Okay.
Is your question at the core is
Just knowing.
that a rate of return that's got to be achieved for these numbers to work? Because 8%,
Yeah,
what do I know, but it sounds,
sounded real good to me.
give me some of that.
Yeah,
But I understand that the Texas Retirement comes up with these things.
anybody ever thought about asking them where they get that from?
Page 35, yeah. 8% actual.
Yeah, I think we've been around this
Yes. go
mulberry
ahead.
tree before.
Go ahead.
And,
Well, Mike, I don't want anybody in this organization to wake up one day and realize that these projections have not been what they expected to be, because you think it means one thing and it means another.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I will look into it.
I've got a question. I seem to remember several years ago, we had the same thought here. We had some excess funds and it helped me remember this correctly. I think we used the excess funds to reduce our pension liability.
Yes.
So
Yes,
we've
we
got,
did.
we've got I'm gonna just use the term on the paper, the Hurricane Harvey fund, 290, that something's gonna have to come out of that. I don't know that it's gonna be the majority of that. Could the surplus funds there, instead of going back to the entities, could they be used to fund this pension liability?
That pension liability is not an actual liability, and I don't believe you took funds from any source to reduce it. It's a number that does not financially impact the present.
I think what Frank is saying is that in years past, this board did have an action that reduced the amount of projection funds that are required to fund the retirement. And so they reduced that marker.
Okay, I'd sure like to see the math as to how that was done, because my understanding from having two hats at one time is that pension liability really is at the state level and not this board's level. And so if you took money, maybe it was pre-GASB 84, 84, whatever it is, maybe you did it before that pension liability showed up the way it does. But frankly, if you took money from the general fund and paid down the liability of that pension, you took a responsibility away from the state and this investment group to fund.
As I said in the beginning, I don't remember all the specifics of it, but I know we did take some excess cash that we had and reduce the pension liability, whether it's this particular incident or not. The other thing that frankly goes through my mind is I have no hint as to what all this stuff means, and what it impacts on us. You're going to ask me to vote for it. So I'm not going to not vote for it because at least somebody knows what's going on, but I don't.
That's not uncommon. So it's, and GASB This new pension liability adjustment still messes with everybody's mind because we're being told by people that we trust, and I'll lift both feet off the floor, that there is no financial impact. Then why do we have to show it? It's a shifting of where the liability really lies at the state level down to the partners involved in it. The school district gets it, the president district gets it. That's why what you're remembering troubles me a little bit as to where the money actually went, if that's what you thought you did.
Jack, every word you're saying
Let-
is clear.
let me,
I don't understand.
There we
let,
go.
let me chime in here.
Not you, it's me.
Okay.
I do not understand.
Tommy helps.
Yeah, Tommy was here. He remembers, there was a reduction of that marker, for lack of a better term. Tommy, go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say, school district, the teacher retirement system and your system is different. The teacher retirement system is funded when it gets in trouble by the state of Texas. Yours is not. And yours, if y'all were to shut down today, just shut down, there would be a liability there. But the reason it was never shown before, governmental accounting is not long-term liability. And this is considered long-term. Long-term does not get into your fund financial statements. And if you look on page 33, and I've got a, I don't know if you got it or not, but there was a change in there. But page 33 shows 5 years of the changes and what the asset is, what your liabilities are, and what they're estimating it to be. So it's a long-term actual liability of the county. Now, it didn't used to be shown at all, meaning before GASB 34. And there's the school districts is a little different. I still don't understand why school districts have to show it, but they show it also the same way you do. But they literally have no liability for it. But I wouldn't put it in there if it's up to me, but it's not up to me. But yours, under your actuary assumptions, they're basing that Mike's going to live to be whatever, and he's going to retire at 65, and that this is how much will have to be paid out. And those are all actuary type calculations. On page 33, you can see to calculate the total liability, they show the changes for the year, and then down below that, they do it backwards. They have the liability on top, they have your assets on the bottom, and they're not showing what the assets are, they're just showing the changes. And you can see it went from 153,000 liability. And again, remember, those dates at the top are correct, that this is all a year behind because, they have to have their financials audited. And normally we're doing this in March and they don't have the actual reports. They don't have all that. So same way with school districts, it's always a year. The information is a year behind. So when it says 2018 for the year 2019, that is correct. And you can see, again, as I mentioned earlier, the net investment income, they probably sold a bunch of stock that was at a loss. And I don't know. I mean, I'm just guessing, but it went from a positive of 353,000 in 2017 to a negative loss of 51,000. So yes, this really is a true liability, but it's long-term. And this would be the liability if, like I said, if as of 12/31/2019, you closed the doors and you had to still pay all your retirement for everybody that's in your retirement system. So that's, hope I didn't make it muddier, but.
No, actually, you made me ask an entirely different question. And that is, if these tables assume an 8% return and an actuarial age for Michael and staff, then what I'm hearing you say is this district as a business guarantees their retirement income at a rate that has not been seen in the market over that period of time.
Well, I don't know, where's that 8% coming from?
That was a question that was posed to me that I don't have my.
It's on page 35.
That's page 35. and All it says is
Investment rate of
investment return 8%.
What I guess what I'm hearing,
Sign me up.
it explained as,
Yeah, that's coming from your
TCD.
state.
okay, the question that I asked, if you were able to get logged in, is that a projected number or an actual historical number? And the difference is significant.
Right, I wrote it.
Yeah, I
down.
don't know.
I wrote it down for me to find out.
All right, here's what you bring, now I'm in your court. What I'm,
Well, tell me what court that is. I'm not sure I know.
let me explain what I'm hearing here, and let's see, just correct me if I'm wrong. Is that you have invested money with this state group. It's not the same group as Invest Teachers Retirement. So therefore, you're expecting to get a certain rate of return. And to the extent that that rate of return in the market with these people that neither you nor I know is looking to this district and the management of it and every other present district to make up for anything that happens in the marketplace where your investments don't produce what you thought it would.
Based on their forecast.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's based on forecast.
So I'm going to jump in. I know I'm not really part of this, but I'm just looking this up because I'm in the plan and I think I know what this is. And I just looked it up and just, it says that the TCDRS target rate of return is 8%.
There you
Is
go.
what they target. That's what they define it as. And if you pull up their
My
website.
target, Jack. All right.
Mine's 10. I'm not getting it. Whatever's
But-
All right, so in light of that piece of information, how does that affect this audit report and its acceptance or denial or whatever?
That's a discussion for after we let him go. I gotta tell you, if that's the scenario, the both of us should be very uncomfortable.
Well, I mean,
If I'm on
it
the
doesn't-
board saying
That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah.
So we're accountable for it. And I thought we were because of what we did several years ago. That I get nervous when I look at a $400,000 liability that I'm not sure where that came from.
all right, and Brent, let's take where you started this conversation. Let's say the market tanks.
Yeah.
And it goes to essentially zip. Is the management of this, the president is responsible for Michael and all his staffs at a projected rate of return of 8%?
I think the answer is yes, if they shut it down tomorrow and everybody was able to take retirement, all that kind of stuff. But
that's
the way
why,
it was explained to us, yes, it was individual. And our deficit, when we first started having to show this, was worse.
and I wonder, do you
But they've
know?
been actually this bad.
I raised this
And then it
question.
got better, and now it's bad.
Yeah,
A
and
practical consideration. That is, if in fact, we're accountable for making sure this is funded and we've got surplus funds, then instead of returning that to the entities, shouldn't we fund our liability?
yeah, and I believe that's in years past, I believe that's what the concern was.
That is
then.
exactly what we did in 1 year. And I don't know, I can't remember what year it was. But this thing, either they changed the way they presented it or they changed the way they talked about it. But I think it at that time was labeled unfunded pension liability, which, makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck. And it was a big number. And we had some surplus funds, so we.
I think.
Just like the school districts, it wasn't there, and then when they changed the rules, it showed up, and when it showed up, everybody went, oh my goodness, but unlike the school district, we were informed that it was our liability, and we just realized
Well,
we had it.
Until
and it-
today, I didn't know that.
And it was substantially, it was either this bad or worse, when we found out, so we had excess funds, I think we applied it towards it. Somebody came down trying to explain it all to us, and clearly, it really took, but when we funded it, the recommendation, I remember, was not to ever fund it to 100% because of the fluctuations in the marketplace. However, it was thought by these people that are managing these funds that we are guaranteeing, I guess, their performance, that there was a percentage that was acceptable range or there was a range that you should be in. And so we went into an acceptable range, I think on par with,
I think it
average
was,
to above average district or something like that.
and it was presented as a percentage of that unfunded, or like,
It was presented like this, it's the percentages are on here, and I can't remember where we were at the time, but they told us we needed to,
We're not gonna resolve this today. My
No.
suggestion would be is that we get the right resources to look at it.
First step is to go back to the minutes. Whenever that was, I don't know what year it was, but we got the minutes somewhere and see what was said at the time.
Well, and
Okay.
is this a similar situation? I don't know. But I certainly don't understand.
Because
You
my
can look-
position on this board is appointed from an outside entity, and it may not get reappointed.
Right.
I'm just gonna tell you what, if you asked to fund from balance today, what you did once before, I would vote no, and I'll tell you why. So you just think about what I said at this time. The market is an ever fluctuating deal. Why would you take cash and throw it out there in the hopes that it would return when it might just as well disappear? If your option is to take funds and designate it within your balance sheet, but don't give it to these investors that apparently we're guaranteeing their rate of return.
Are you saying this rhetorically, or do you want to answer?
No, well, I'm saying when this comes up, this is how I would try to convince you to do it. Don't give it to a fund balance that you don't know what their history is. Put it on your balance sheet as designated. Yes, fund it, but not in the fashion of giving a third party, which we're guaranteeing their performance.
you're
Before I
saying,
would make that decision, I'd have to have more information. So if they're telling us that they lost $300,000 in our retirement account because of the stock market, I'd have them shot for poor performance.
where's the 290? Can you, I guess a greater answer would be, when you're saying Hurricane Harvey 290, do you have any idea, Tommy, how much of that is attributable to, because those are committed fund balances, that's the 290.
Mike, we can discuss this the rest of the day. We're not going to get the answer.
No,
That's why my suggestion
You
is
should just know.
outside
Yeah.
research.
Okay,
Yeah, I think
I-
we need to
I-
move along and,
I'll agree with that.
Sorry.
Yeah, you're okay.
Sorry.
You're making
no,
some good suggestions. 8%.
okay. Tommy, anything else?
No, just one thing. I think the year that you're talking about where you funded it extra was either 2016. But that's all I got.
Yes, I remember it happening over at the other building.
Mhm.
Yep.
Let's look back at that and see, but as Brett said, we're not gonna solve it right now. So,
Yeah, the board minutes may be 2015 to do it in 2016 or somewhere in there.
quite possible.
And to tell you, I wasn't prepared. I prepared for a lot of other things, but I was not prepared.
But
for
you
the question.
couldn't understand that.
No, I was not prepared to answer the question about the 8% actual or actual.
But that's all I got.
I guess that was pretty evident. by my
Okay.
answer.
Do we need the motion to accept the audit report?
I think that's in a minute, yeah.
I'll make a motion.
So moved.
Okay. so moved. Second. Further discussion? All in favor? Okay.
Thank you, Tommy.
Tommy, thanks
Thank you
again.
all. Appreciate it. See y'all later.
Okay, great. Okay. That's the audit. Moving on to item 5, consideration of possible action regarding approval of the Aransas County Appraisal District's 2021 budget.
Thank you.
Ooh, yeah, thank you. Nice.
Sorry, it was, that was, yeah, that was in the, where's the budget? All right, guys, I thought I gave you everything in paper format, and,
Now, my recollection
but
is,
it's definitely in it's definitely was sent to you early.
Oh, yeah, we got it.
And so this, just to rehash, this is the budget that was proposed in June, I think it was June 10th or before June 10th, that this board approved. It's gone out to the entities. They've taken a look at it. We haven't heard anything back from them, and this is just a motion to approve that.
They had a limited time to respond or automatically accept. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's, so I want to say it's 30 days. Yeah, it's only 30 days. Yeah.
So we can't directly give pushback.
And no response within the 30 days constitutes acceptance.
Yes.
And, yeah, we've laid hands on this about 3 times. And the last time we approved the proposed, at that point, it was proposed budget.
So now we need a motion
Yeah,
to
and there,
approve the actual.
just to be sure, Mike, there are no changes between that proposed that we approved and what we want to approve as a final budget now.
That is correct. That's why, and it's on everybody's tablet. That's why it actually says proposed budget at the very top.
Yeah.
Until this action is still.
Okay,
I move we approve the budget as presented.
Second.
okay, motion made and seconded. Further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay. No, that's the reappraisal plan.
Yep.
We'll just enter that in a minute.
Yeah, that's just in a minute. That's the
That's
only
what it is.
resolution that we do, is right there.
All right. Item 6. Consideration possible action on resolution adopting Aransas County Appraisal District 21-22 reappraisal plan.
And for that, the reason that I sent those early was that you could look at, I actually sent another copy with the changes that were made. Either there was redactions or there was additions. This is a general, some of it gets into very specific stuff, but really talks about the, I can go through it very quickly. You have an executive summary, you have a tax code requirement written plan. This is the sections of the tax code that actually require this document. It defines the market area, which is the entire appraisal district. A market area is just an area in which you appraise. Moving on from page 7 to page 8, it talks methods, and page 9 is methods and procedure, which is the map review program. We are reviewed every second year by the comptroller. This kind of overviews that reappraisal cycle. It talks about the market areas with what general market area, micro market areas. We identify those in our own plan. Page 11 is the analysis of available resources. This is kind of a breakdown of not only the budget, but our actual assets that we have and the assets as far as people and what their duties are. Moving on to page 12, planning and organization. It talks again what we have as far as some assets. We have a CAMA system, which is a computer assisted mass appraisal system, a CAMA system. That's our Harris governed true automation software. We also do physical data collection. It talks about some of those things. This board has already acted on the fact that we were able to have source information from other organizations such as CoStar and TREP. We're trying to get records, and we're trying to get sales data, we're trying to get income data, and then we move forward with that information. Moving on to page 14. This is the, just talks about the tax years in question, which is the 21 and 22 cycle. Performance analysis, it talks about ratio studies. So how do we do appraisals? We do what's called ratio studies. We do what is this sale and how much do we have on it? And that ratio study is another thing that's done, that's actually performed by the comptroller to us in the form of what's called a property value study. Okay, this is our own self-test, is a ratio study. Moving forward on page 15, we have the key calendar of events. 16, we have the income approach, and that's described in great detail with the NOI information. It gives some other accounting on page 18. There's basically a formula below the NOI with potential gross rent. It gives some examples of what that would look like on page 19. And on 20 and continuing on 21. On 21, it also goes into personal property valuation that's typically done on a rendition type basis. Inventory appraisal, that we have what's called inventory value, which we have real property inventory that's done in a very specific way. We have business personal property inventory, and that's the inventory in which it would sell to another buyer who would continue the business. That's, again, these are appraisal methodologies. Moving on to page 23, there's a notice process that's required by the code, a hearing process that's required by the code, and then we start to go into data collection. This is another, we're talking about how we see stuff in the marketplace and how we apply it to our appraisal process. New construction and demolition, basically, what does that look like? We go out in the field and we collect. We can obviously see that that was an old structure and this is a brand new house, and we make those distinguishing factors. Also, remodeling, we're able to see those things. We're able to get permits from the city. Sometimes we get permits from the county. This is just the re-inspection of the county. Re-inspection of problematic market areas and re-inspection of university properties. We typically go by every property every year. And what I mean by go by, we do have some in that we just do so by pictometry, which means it's a very sparse area. We don't have any structures there of any consequence. So we'll do that from imagery just to see. It was vacant land last year, it's vacant land this year, there's nothing to pick up. Or if there is something to pick up, we'll go by and pick it up. Moving on to page 25, field verification and sales data. This is talking about how we do stuff inside the office when we verify the sales. How do we do that? The pilot study. Again, there's use path standards, standard rule 6. There for you, talking about market areas. Valuation by tax year, we do the sales comparison approach. It's one of the most common approaches to value. It's what people call the market approach. You also have the cost approach to value. We have what's called a hybrid value, just in case you're ever wondering. A cost approach to value is typically designated by a Marshall Swift table. It has a local modifier. What do things build for? So 3 approaches to value. What does this thing cost to build? The sales comparison or market approach is what is that worth in the marketplace? And the income approach is what is that gross rentable area produce as a valuation? Those are 3 general approaches to value. Okay, so those are generally described on pages 26 and 27. Moving on to page 28, you have special inventory of residential property. Again, we talked about that a little bit. If a developer starts a new development and he or she takes this acreage and then starts to cut up into lots and put some infrastructure in there, it's the inventory cost is the cost in which you can hold that and sell it as a unit to somebody else and still realize the profit at the end. So if you had individual lots that sold for, let's say, $50,000, it would only have an inventory value of maybe a third of that or half of that, because that property owner is actually putting money into the infrastructure for roads, sewer, electric, things like that. So there's a cost there, and there's a methodology there. Special valuation for agriculture use. We have very little in the county compared to other districts. That's on pages 28 and 29. Continuing on to 30 and 31. Again, as a percentage of whole, we don't have very much agricultural property compared to other districts. 32 is tangible business personal property. These are things that inside a business place. So if you took my wife's office as an example, we have eyeglasses and medical equipment, and we have medical machines, and we have eyeglass cleaner. those things are quantified by the property owners. They send those in through what's called a rendition process. And through that rendition, that person says what they think these assets are worth through depreciation schedule. Page 33 is the key calendar of events that was mentioned before. These are kind of markers of what, when things are mailed out, when things happen during that process. And 34 is complete. I'll entertain any questions that anybody has.
Mike, is it fair to say that the reappraisal plan, if somebody came in and said, what do these people do and how do they do it? This is
This
what
is
you might give them.
This is a 30,000 foot, this is available to anybody.
Yeah.
It's on our website. After today's motion, it's actually mailed to the entities. It's mailed to the comptroller. It's a 30,000 foot elevation of generally how we do our appraisal practice.
Looks like a good job, Mike.
Yeah,
Thanks.
no,
It's my staff, yeah, they did a great job. Thank you.
You got a lot of requests for these to take home and read.
Never, well, I take it back. Twice, maybe, in my 15 years? Like outside of a taxing unit.
Actually, this thing is pretty good to, refresh the memory of
Yeah.
how all the cogs run.
How we do what we
Yeah.
do, yeah. 30,000 foot elevation.
We need to adopt this, and I will entertain a motion at any time.
So, but
Second.
Moved and seconded, further discussion.
I wouldn't have his job for 3 times what he makes. I read this back here on the difference in RV parks, and I thought, good luck with making that stick.
Well,
Yeah, this is,
comprehensive is the word, right? It comes to mind.
okay, motion made and seconded. Any more discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay. All right. Give that to Ms. Donna. Use Ms. Donna. Moving on to item 7, consideration of possible action on waiver of penalty to Lamar Improvement District for the 3rd quarterly payment.
And just to bring you up to speed, this board, it was brought to this board's attention a couple of years ago that you have the authority to waive penalties. I think at that time, there was a notification after so many days that you wanted the district to notify within 30 days if we had received payment to officially notify the taxing unit. In this particular case, they had mailed it according to their accounting or their person, and we just never received it. So they canceled that check, they wrote us another check. I will say, since the time this was put together, we have received payment already. And so I would suggest that we waive the penalty associated with the late
History tells you what? They ever been late before?
payment. I don't remember. I would have to have Joe's name here to know, but
But it was an issue.
if they had, you probably would.
It was,
Well, what I do remember is the issue with the city of Aransas past in years past, and that's the reason this board made a protocol to be able to waive the penalty. Otherwise, the penalty is required, and so we don't want to penalize our own taxing units.
I agree. I'm only thought is, it's like, if you're gonna bring to the board next time,
Right.
consider waiving something. How many times have we done this before? 0, easy choice. Okay, once a year, once every 6 months.
Yeah, not to my recollection, Lamar Improvement District. The recollection that I have was the city of Aransas past.
Okay.
Okay.
Action item.
Then we can just in effect table this.
No, you can,
Wait, are you?
I'm asking you to waive it.
Go ahead.
What is the dollar amount that's being requested to waive?
I can get that for you real quick if you wait.
Just a minute.
Well, is it $10 or $10,000?
Lamar Improvement District it's like $3,000, somewhere in the $3,000 range or something like that. I want to say.
That's
I
the
have to
amount of
get it.
payment of the penalty.
The payment. The penalty is like
It's a
10%
percentage.
of that, yeah.
Percentage of that.
I move we waive it.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Further discussion. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
One of the things you might think about, Mike, and we probably have to come back to this, is to give the chief appraiser discretion to waive these things, where he sees a good reason for it.
Write that down, because I don't know if I can do that or not. But ask Jim.
Now, it just doesn't come up very often, and we can always deal with it.
Yeah.
It's pretty.
But we all know that the mail system has its pitfalls.
The post office probably thought it was a mail-in ballot.
Careful.
We're not gonna say any more about that.
I couldn't resist.
I was fighting my tongue for others.
Okay. All right. Moving on to the chief appraiser's report. You have the floor, Michael.
All right, so the chief appraiser's report, the very first thing is the supplemental role presentation. That's that document that you have, it's pretty voluminous. Says certified role changes for assessed value, and it has a whole bunch of stuff there. This is the document that we're required to tell you about, and you really can't you can't really say anything about the value on it. You can ask me questions on this if you'd like. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, 2 pages front and back here. Certified role changes for assessed value. We have groups 300, 301, 302, 304, 305, 306, 307, 308, 309, 310, 311, and 312. There are markers of what they are. Basically, to get an example, you're looking at 301. There was a lawsuit that was settled or lost. And you can see a $1.3 million loss. I mean, there's nothing you can, it's just factual. There's also a, here's another example on chief appraiser motions group 304, 2014, you see 116,820. A chief appraiser motion is generally a motion to correct by me that I saw an error back then that was never repaired or fixed, and finally caught it, fixed it. It usually is in the favor of the city. So there's the chief appraiser. This is the supplemental appraisal role presentation. You don't have to do anything other than acknowledge that I gave it to you. The next thing is the financial report. And so on the financials, and again, I apologize. When we did this, I was thinking it was going to be for September 1st. And I actually have another month here, but all I have to present right now is January through July. And that's in your data. It's towards the back here. And you can see that January through July represents 58% of the year that's gone through. The budgeted amount the total expense is 52.9 or 53%, so we're pretty much on track. I'll answer any questions that anybody has as far as financials.
I don't see anything that looks particularly out of whack. Of course, there's some one-time payments and that thing that sometimes look funny, but
Legal services are pretty high thus far, but I expected that, so. All right, moving on.
okay.
The other is the map review of the
Mike,
20
we have legal services. We have a long time ago, $30,000 we put into restricted funds for legal services. I recall, or really relevant to today. Do you feel that $30,000 is adequate?
I think, in
Now
line-
that we've actually pulled the trigger on what I think we set those funds up for years and years and years ago.
yeah, we have, the 2020 approved, which is just voted on today to approve it. The 2020 approved is, I'm sorry, 2020 approved was 19,000. And the 2021, I think we actually even went up on that. 2021 on legal services, we're at 22,000. So we're approaching that 30,000. Just as soon as just go up incrementally, if that's the question.
Although, I mean, you have that budgeted in the budget for legal services. We have 30,000 in restricted funds
Committed funds.
committed funds for overage or
Unanticipated.
legal.
Legal.
Yes, my question is, and if I remember right, when we put 30,000 into the restricted, it was the last time that this district thought they were gonna go the income approach because he anticipated lawsuits. So this is 10 years later, however long it may be, we are under the income approach, and we're increasing the budget for legal fees. Do we feel that the 30,000 restricted is adequate, meaning that we set that money aside 10 years ago? Is that still a good number?
I don't know, I could have a conversation.
An emergency fund for unanticipated legal fees, that's why we set that up, with the anticipation of lawsuits, I believe, going to the
Right.
income approach.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I need to ask you, have a real conversation.
And if we're budgeting for legal fees and budgeting appropriately, we still need to keep money in restricted funds for unanticipated legal fees. I think it's probably always a good idea, but
The answer to that is, I think, yes. You having some committed funds for unanticipated things, and as you can see, what we have with our financials, we're gonna be over budget this year. You know, and we raised it, I mean, basically for 2020, we're at 19, we're at 84%. For a 58% of the year, we're gonna be over budget. And in 21, we went from 19 to 22, so we increased that about 3,000. You know, I don't know, I think I'd like to stay there, but I mean, this is going to, that unanticipated big lawsuit that happens. And I don't know, I mean, it gets pretty pricey pretty quick.
and we set that number a long time ago. So I think it doesn't need to be, a decision does not need to be made today,
Okay.
but
I will.
Glad you brought that up. I think it's worth looking at.
If you haven't used it in a 10-year period, you have to ask, does it need to stay there?
well, we put it there because 10 years ago, we were warned that we may have to go to the income approach, and that was going to probably get some lawsuits going. And in those 10 years or whatever that went by, we somehow escaped going to the income approach. Don't ask me why, because I don't do appraisals. But this year we went to the income approach, and
So you're saying that,
the reason we did it is coming into fruition, but the budgeted amount was based on these 10 years didn't pass. It was always a good idea to have legal funds, I guess, unanticipated legal funds in the reserve, but that was one of the main reasons that reserve was set up, was the anticipation that would be triggered at some point. And just like this year, may or may not be at a time where you can go as set reserve fund aside, it may be done. You're going to deal with it later. So
And we are coming up to the deadline. July 25th is when we certified the roll. So August 25th, September 25th, you know, we're coming up to the 60-day deadline. So, I mean, we have received specifically lawsuits. We already have them in our hand and they're specifically dealing with the income approach. I don't know how many more we'll receive before the deadline. There's another 10 days or so before.
so you certainly wouldn't take any money out of it.
would definitely not reduce it. Yeah, my question was really, was it? Just making sure as we talk about moving funds into restricted funds out of our excess Harveys and things like that, if we go over budget too much, you know, at some point we're going to run a cash flow problem. We got a glass of money to fund our lawsuit, and that's not the place that I'd like to be if we don't have to be.
Yeah, I agree. I will pose the question and get a response. Moving on to the 2020 map review results. All I have is an email that's here. This is Catherine McGee. She's the map review, which is the methods and procedures of the comptroller's office. There was only 3 items that they recommended that needs to be put into place for next year's cycle. One is to publish, was a procedure to publish the protest procedures before May 15th. And I will do that next cycle, and that'll be proof that we met that requirement. Submit a copy of the Curtis reappraisal plan to the comptroller 60 days within approval. We just approved that today. After I will send that to the comptroller. Once I've sent that to the comptroller, that thing will be met. That's item number 40. And item number 55 is correctly categorized according to PDAC classifications for category D, and D is F is agriculture, and D is commercial. No, F is commercial, D is reverse. And so there were some accounts that were incorrectly classified.
We had some
We have
things in the wrong box.
Yeah, we just have things in the wrong box, and we're gonna correct that.
Okay.
So this is basically saying that it was a pretty good methods and procedure review.
Mike, I seem to remember you typically get a numerical score with the map.
Right.
Where were we this year?
Again, once I correct these 3 items, she'll give me the final score, but we were, there was,
It's been a source of pride.
there's usually
This-
meets or exceeds, and I think we're at the meets right now, with the exception of these 3 things. So, good. Moving on to the PDS study results. As you may remember, I informed this board that we initially failed the property value study for both districts, both the Aransas Pass ISD and the Aransas County ISD. At which time this district staff went into high gear of appealing those decisions by the comptroller. And through the first exchange for the Aransas Pass, we were able to succeed just on information that we sent them, and they agreed with us. So that was a pretty early win. For the Aransas County ISD, it was much more difficult. We had to go through an actual proceeding in which we zoomed into the meeting, and through that we were able to prevail, which is a great. I mean, I applaud my staff for really pulling together the resources and showing, some really good data. One of the saving graces that we had was actually showing the rate of basically market value rebound and how quickly the marketplace was rebounding, just how quickly the market values were going up. And until we did these very specific, what's called paired sales analysis, until we actually did that data and actually did those, compiled that data and actually showed it to the comptroller, we didn't even really know like how fast, because we were actually having okay, what's going on here? And when we actually saw that and we're able to say that the time adjustment was required for these samples that they had selected, then we were able to prevail on our study. And that's what's part of one of these. I have it right here. It's called and I printed these off. This is the confidence interval detail, and I have it for both Aransas Pass and Aransas County ISD. And you'll notice that it says the words are local test value. At the bottom it says within confidence interval. That's, you pass the test if your words say within confidence interval. So I just want to affirm to this board that my staff really knocked it out of the park. I mean, really went to war, for lack of a better term, and they did well, and we were able to prevail, which means that we were in for 19, which means we didn't have to get tested for 20, which means the next time is actually 21, which is this next cycle. We're actually in 21 right now. So, I mean, we're collecting data for 21 right now. We're actually working in 21 years. So it's a really big win. FEMA update. We have been having discussions with FEMA on the monies that we're going to have to return. As soon as we get those official documents on that amount, we will forward that to this board. And my recommendation is that we pay FEMA back as quickly as possible. Again, to rehash, FEMA said that they, we're the government, we're here to help you. And in the grand scheme of things, there was one thing that they did, and which I'm thankful for, but many things that they won't want returned because we had excess funds from the insurance funds. So when I get that, you will have that at the very next meeting, and we'll have it with you there. The next is we need to start having discussions again on item F on the remodel of this building. As you can see, it's still not there. We just talked about the PDS study. It was my intention to have the RFPs and RFQs in the months of May and April, May and April of this last, of just, 5 months ago. It was my intention to do all that work then, so that after our appeal season, the contractor would already be at work. But that didn't happen. I lost that time because I was in the PBS fight. So I'm just affirming to you that I'm going to start that whole process up again. And we'll need to have some good discussions about this place in working order.
Good.
And G, offer and provide insight for other non-financial resources to assist other appraisal districts affected by Hurricane Laura. I just thought I would bring this to this board. Obviously, we have Hurricane Laura, we have Hurricane, there's another one that's gonna get.
Sally, that's
Yeah.
over in Mississippi now.
Yeah, and I did talk to Dee about this. Most of those districts have pixometry imagery, and our staff is very confident in discerning damage ratings. If you may remember that we had Harvey codes that were associated with damage ratings. Since that time, the actual state legislature has put into place in section 1135 associated with damage ratings. They're very close to ours as far as the level of rating. And so our staff has experience. And these other places, Orange, Texas, and these other places that experienced a hurricane, I reached out to those chiefs to say, hey, we can help. And what I mean to say non-financial resources is just like we would have our staff take their imagery, kind of do QA and QC on what happened on their storm, and to help provide assistance there. So not anything other than that. So I did speak to the chief at Orange. He thanked me for, he said he still may call me back, but he thought he was in good shape. They've been through a couple. I may get a call from the person just to the north of him. So just informing you that's going down.
That's great. Anything we can do to support that.
Okay, I'm going to throw a damp blanket, or
Yeah,
at least
yeah.
have you consider it. When you see in your financials that you've got a fair amount of, I'm going to characterize it as unfunded time off because you can't pay overtime or don't pay overtime, how much do you think the impact of something like helping another president district could raise your time off and overtime? Just be cognizant.
Yeah. I will say that experientially, when we were helped, it was at a 3-day click for 3 employees from one of the biggest districts in the state. So something less than that. Travis County came down and helped us, and I tend to remember it's 3 or 4 days, right? And then there was two different times they came.
Yeah.
But it's something less than that. But good question. And it's not damp at all. It's just being cognizant of the realities of it. So
We wouldn't travel also this time.
yeah, we wouldn't travel. This is all in-house. This would be at our computer desk, taking their data, giving some analysis, giving them the data back, and saying good luck.
I think it's marvelous. The only thought is, be careful what you ask for.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah, Mike talked to me about it, and I thought it was pretty much a no-brainer. the way he set it up. And we did get some good help from some districts after the storm. So pass it forward.
And that's all I have for my chief appraiser's report.
Okay.
Any questions?
Any further questions? Okay, we can stand adjourned.
Unofficially, I think I could have a 5-minute conversation with the board members, well, as long as we're off, and we're not talking action items.
Sure.
Well, I mean,
Well,
hang on, just wait a second. It's really important that we don't, we have the Open Meetings Act, so.
We're going to be discussing something that was discussed in this particular meeting, which gives us the privilege to do so, because we're not going to change the action already made.
but we're still, meeting is still on live, just so we know. And I can turn it off just we adjourned and I was about to do that, but I've stopped. I'll turn it off whenever you're ready.
Well, I mean, again, for you to discuss things corporately, you have to
Leave it
do it.
on.
Yeah, you can leave it on.
Okay, leave it on. I just didn't want to tie them up anymore because it doesn't involve an action item going forward.
Okay.
I want to go back and revisit that investment decision because I want everybody to understand what I got out of it if I got out of it active. So we're still on, we're still listening, people, and good, they're paying attention. What I heard was is that we have a group of people that so far in this room, nobody knows who's responsible for investing in Fresno District's money. When Rick Perry was governor, there were some individuals that he appointed to invest monies from various state agencies. Those gentlemen were paid millions of dollars in salaries with no financial impact on them, risk whatsoever. When I hear statements like, we've got this actuarial table going to give us 8% return on our money, at the same time knowing whenever it's not 8%, it goes back to the present district to make up that shortfall. Which begs the question, as board members, do we have a fiduciary responsibility to support that? Do we have personal liability to support that?
And we ought to make that part of the research Mike's gonna do about the whole issue.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a little stuff. I mean, I can show you a little bit about it right here that I just looked up while we're talking. If you will indulge me for a second. This is the actual data here for the actual returns for this. The top line is the return. This is for as of 2019. There's what they're talking about, where their 8% comes from is second to the right column is the 30-year actual. And you can go back and run this. We can see what it looked like in 1918, 17, 16. And you can see how there are losses. There's a loss in 18, there's a loss in 2008, there's a loss in several other years. You can see when some of these have happened. But overall, their goal is achieving this 8%.
Okay, we're still going.
30-year on, yes, we are.
Okay,
On a 30-year basis is what it's that's their idea.
don't enter the meeting, please.
Okay.
Yeah, as I recall, this was from that little booklet that they presented. Remember? That's my, that's the only copy.
I guess, this is the.
I need-
I appreciate you bringing it up, but I think it's premature. I think it's one small piece of the bigger question.
I just want to know, I think, my question is fairly simple.
Your question is right.
If Michael
We
is,
need to answer.
if Michael's
Not
looking
that.
and his staff are looking at an 8% return, and if the absence of that 8% return is dumped back on the oppressive district's management, I got an issue with that.
So
Then am I financially responsible for that?
So I guess the point is that I don't think we understand enough about the whole topic. At least I don't understand enough about the whole topic, even with the discussion that we had today, to render a judgment, yes, no, maybe, or what is it? I'm still, I don't know what's going on. So.
And until today, I assumed that state funds were invested by the same group of individuals, with the same responsibilities, and it's clear it's not.
Who knows? I don't have any idea.
Well, he said that it's not the same as the school district, because the
Right.
state then kicks in whatever the shortfall is in there.
Can
I
I,
want to just imagine
Thank you.
just nervous about the fact that Michael gets to in future years when all of the boards turned over, going to the entities and saying our retirement fund is shortfall, so.
I'm big time. I don't like that position.
I don't know.
okay, it's really important that, procedurally,
This is such a-
everybody was sent in an email the 15th, September
Yes.
15th.
Because he
What-
printed his out.
What Dean was reading off of was this list of papers, which was the 3rd, September 3rd. It's important for the record, although many of these items were done in exactly the same way, if you'll notice that there's more items, and one is the hearing on, and one is the consideration for. But I would like it for the record, I would like you to go through this again and just make a public record that we have done these items. Do you see the differences now?
No,
Yeah.
Hold the September 3rd through the September 15th. Because Dee was reading off the September 3rd and we were just all
Yeah.
following him. And that's okay. It's not your fault, Dee. It's
So-
my fault from giving.
So
you-
in doing so, does he need to reopen the meeting since it was closed? Because this is not really.
That's why I
official
said,
meeting.
don't turn it
It's
off.
not, it's still on, but he might need to reopen a
Let's
meeting,
let's
just
reopen
say to ensure that we covered this.
it. I will. Let's have a motion to reopen the meeting.
We need to close it.
we really close it.
We need to adjourn?
No,
Okay,
no,
good.
it started,
Okay,
He said we adjourned.
but nobody.
Nobody.
Then he didn't.
then nobody did.
Everybody was having so much fun, nobody left.
Okay, items 1, 2, and 3 are exactly the same. Item 4 is exactly the same. Item 5 is a public hearing on 2021 budget. And for the record, we have not had any participants that have tried to come in. Item 6 was the approval of the budget. Item 7 was the public hearing on, and again, reaffirming that we did not have any citizens associated with wanting to ask questions about the reappraisal plan. So item 8 is the consideration of possible action resolution adopting the reappraisal plan, which was done. And item, what is that going to be, 9? Is the waiver of the penalty, so that is the same as number 7. So the only two things is the public hearing, which is a requirement to let people ask about the.
And we're confident nobody came out on the Zoom and.
We
nobody
were
showed up.
watching the whole time.
Yeah.
Okay, I was gonna say, I can't see it, so as long as we know that nobody came in and nobody wanted to ask, what there could have possibly been. There's not much of a hearing.
And the chief appraisal report, all of those items are the same. So
We have monthly dispensed with all of the action items on.
thank you. All right, that's it.
Okay,
Well, I'm officially okay.
let's quit. Before we dig this hole any deeper.
Gosh, bless, I'm sorry, guys.
Gotcha.
Adjourning, we're
Are we adjourning for real this time?
We're adjourning for real this time. Okay, you can turn it off. Quick.
Where's the floor?
Now we're talking.
Really all that.
We turned off.